Are you on the side of the let's hang out on the couch and Netflix and binge all night? Or are you incorporating a pretty routine exercise level into your day-to-day activity? How about you?
I do a lot of exercise. I walk.
Okay.
I get in Cherokee Park a lot.
Oh, nice and hilly. Great.
The yoga class I go to.
Okay.
2 exercise classes and Tai Chi.
Amazing. You do more than I do, I think. Okay, great. How about you?
I walk every day.
Okay.
I've had some significant back issues this year.
Okay.
And I've had several treatments, and I'm going next week for a PT evaluation.
Okay, great. And that PT might be able to help modify some of your
I've
current.
had it a number of times, and it's always been helpful.
Okay, great.
Looking forward to it.
Great, wonderful. I'll come back to you in just a second. We're sharing our exercise habits right now. All right, how about you, sir?
I usually do some band things with my hands.
Okay, great.
Then I walk with a rollator.
Okay, so you're already doing some strength training, a little bit of cardiovascular activity. And I was talking to this couple earlier. We do a lot of strength training already. What other type of exercises would you like to do?
Muscular cardiovascular for a half hour.
Okay, so a little bit of everything. So is that more like walking
No,
on
it's a
treadmill?
Recumbent bike.
Recumbent bike. Okay.
And,
Okay, great. Oh, so you're getting those legs and arms in.
yeah.
Okay, wonderful.
And a rapid heart rate.
And getting that heart rate up. Wonderful. And then back right over here. Oh,
Oh, I was just gonna say I also walk.
and you also walk. Okay, great. She was sharing earlier that she started incorporating a lot of strength training to help with her osteoporosis. And it has so far been very effective in improving her DEXA scans.
Just swimming for low impact and some weight training and also a little yoga too. So.
Okay, so nice well-rounded yoga, weight training, swimming. Do you have any current exercises you like to do?
I do yoga twice a week.
Okay, great.
15 minutes before yoga, we do strength training for the upper body one day and for the lower body another day.
Okay, we have an incredibly active group here today. So I'm probably preaching to the crowd, but that's okay. If anything, today is going to affirm and really help resolve your motivation in keeping up those exercise routines. All right, so the musculoskeletal system. Just a quick review from your anatomy class from a long, long time ago. Our musculoskeletal system is that organ system of the body that gives us the ability to use our muscles and our skeletal system. It gives us support, right? So it keeps us upright, so we're not just a bag of tissue on the floor. So it gives us structure, stability. It protects our vital organs, right? We like all of our vital organs being protected and guarded from injury and harm. And then it finally allows us to move our body, right? If any of you are from like a mechanical mindset, thinking about pulleys and levers and movement, that's what our bodies, or our bones and our muscles are doing when it's helping us move our body and for mobility and for activity. So it's pretty important for all of the things function related. When we think about the musculoskeletal system, it's made up of several tissues. So we have our bones, right? Everyone's familiar with the bones. Can anyone tell me how many bones we have in our body? 206. Someone's good at trivia tonight, aren't they? All right, how many muscles do we have in our body? Anyone want to guess? Nope. Over 600 muscles in our body. And you have everything from large muscles, like your thigh muscles and your hamstrings, to tiny, tiny muscles that move your eyeball, right? So there's all sorts of different shapes and sizes, but most people have over 600 muscles in their body that we want to keep active and healthy. The musculoskeletal system, we also include our cartilage, which for anyone that has joint pain, you'll know what your cartilage is. That's typically that tissue that protects the end of your bones. So your knee joint has cartilage on the end of both of those bones the joint move smoothly and keep the bones from rubbing against each other. We also have tendons that connect our muscles to the bones, right? So when you've heard of tendinitis, that's when you get inflammation in that particular tissue. Our ligaments are what hold bones together. So if you can see in the photo, so ligaments go bone to bone, tendons go muscle to bone. And then our joints are just simply where two or more bones come together. Okay, so you have your knee joint, your shoulder joint, your ankle joint, all sorts of joints in our body. Okay, all of those tissues are what make up that musculoskeletal system. And we know that over time, those tissues are going to change with aging. So we'll talk a little bit about that piece. One thing I like to include in almost all of my presentations on aging and exercise is a diagram that shows how aging affects our mobility and how we go through different stages of good mobility to impaired to disability, okay? So it's a pretty simple graph, and I love the concept. So on our y-axis here, we have health and function, right? The higher we go, the healthier and more independent we are. And then the x-axis has aging. So we start here, our young, healthy, kiddo, teenage days, where we gain functional independence, right? Like a baby actually starts pretty low because they're dependent upon other people, their parents, for mobility and function. So we peak typically our 20s, 30s, 40s, and then we know over time our function starts to decline. There's just age-related changes that are normal and unavoidable. And so our independence and that function does start to decline. But what we want to keep focused on is making sure that decline, where our health and function is, stays above the threshold or stays above the line of function, right? Because after a while when we start declining, suddenly sometimes it feels like people get to the point where all of a sudden I can't put my shoes on anymore, right? That often those changes didn't happen overnight, but typically we reach this point where now it's causing functional and mobility limitations to then a certain point where we're just truly to that disabled stage. I like to tell the story about my grandmother who had started to develop hip arthritis and got to the point where she needed a total hip replacement. And it's funny because she said, Beth, it just came out of nowhere. I really never had that much problem with my hip until one day I just couldn't walk at all. Well, that arthritis didn't just pop up overnight, but what happened is that it started to bother her. She started to slow down a little bit. She started to avoid activities that caused pain until one day it dipped below this critical threshold where she could no longer do the things she needed to and decided, I need to have surgery, right? So ideally, from a PT and health and wellness standpoint, if we can be monitoring people sooner before we get to that critical threshold of losing function, the better off we're going to be, right? And so these different trajectory lines compare someone with accelerated decline, right? It might be accelerated due to an illness or disease or an accident or a fall, right? Where we are going to take a quicker dip down. But ideally, this might be kind of the typical decline we see, but ideally, if we can be as proactive and really lean into the wellness side of things and keep a healthy aging and stay above the line, that's ideally where we want to be. Does that make sense? I love the visual. I think, anytime we can do things that are going to help keep us above the line, that's what we want to do. Okay? Okay, sorry, that's a long digression there, but I just love the concept. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about normal changes that we're going to see with our bones and joints, okay? Because as I mentioned earlier, aging We know that there's going to be certain changes that we can anticipate, which is helpful to know and to monitor. Our bones over time lose calcium and other minerals, and so they're going to lose that density or that strength in that bone. Okay. Our vertebrae, which are the bones in our spine, will also lose some of that density. You also have vertebral discs. Have you ever heard of someone's their disc slipped or something like that? Over time, that starts to lose the fluid that's in the center of that disc, so they start to compress and not provide as much cushion in between the vertebrae. The arches of our feet start to lose support from some slapping of that soft tissue. Our long bones, so like our arms and our legs, they don't necessarily shrink or get shorter, but they are going to get more brittle over time. And then our joints, we find, will eventually get stiffer and lose some of that flexibility or be harder to move over time. So if you add some of these things up together, what happens with our height as we age? We ain't getting taller, unfortunately. Very unfortunate for me, because I'm not starting off with a lot. But a lot of those small changes, especially in the spine, can contribute to decreased height over time. Hopefully you all are being measured by your physician, on regular checkups, because that can be an indicator of bone and joint health over time. It may also affect our posture over time, right? So because we lose some of that flexibility, some of the shape of our spine, we start to see that forward head, stooped shoulders, that kyphotic change in our upper back, right? And as I talk about that, everyone starts to sit up straight. I love it. My students do that in class too, so it's great. Some of these changes to our bone and joints is also going to affect our mobility, right? It may affect our walking speed. It may affect our walking pattern. Walking may become more stiff, more challenging over time. So a lot of these are changes we're going to expect to see. We're also going to see changes to, oh, yes ma'am.
Is there anything that you can do to counteract let's see, you referenced mineral loss.
Mhm.
Is there anything you can do to prevent that or counteract it?
We are going to talk about that here in just a little bit. So that's a great question. She asked about how can we counteract the changes to our bone health. So yes, and strength and flexibility, strengthening especially is going to be one of the most important things. So we'll talk about that. We're also going to talk about the changes in our muscles, right? I think bone health gets a lot of recognition, especially with women, especially in women post-menopause, because can anyone identify what hormone do women lose, especially fast after menopause? Estrogen, right? And that loss of estrogen significantly impacts bone health. So women have just a very unfair disadvantage when it comes to bone health as we age. So I think bone health gets talked about a lot. What we don't talk about as much is the loss in muscle mass as well. Over time, we know that we're going to typically lose muscle mass. Anywhere from 25 to 40% is what comes up in studies over time. So if you took a cross-section of your thigh muscle, of your quad muscle, and you compared a healthy 20-year-old to maybe even a healthy 70-year-old, there's typically going to be a notable change in how big that muscle is. And some of that is just unavoidable muscle change and decline. Some of those changes with muscle mass starts as early as in the 20s for men and as early as the 40s for women. So whereas I love these talks that help address these concepts to older adults, there's times when I feel like we need to be starting this in our 20s and 30s We're gonna also have other neuromuscular changes, like the speed in which our nerve signals connect from our brain to our muscles. And even small changes like that affect our ability to use our muscles, right? So we have a little bit slower reflex time, a little bit slower reactionary time to produce some of those quick movements over time. So someone may still be working on general strength, but it may not be as fast of a movement as we're used to having when we're younger. Finally, when we also think about our tendons and our ligaments, those are the connective tissue that either holds bone to bone or attaches our muscles to bone. Those, as we age, take longer to heal. So if we have an older adult with an orthopedic surgery or tendinitis or a tendon rupture, it's going to take longer to recover from that. It can still heal. It's soft tissue that will still heal, but it does take longer to do that over time, which is important for us to remember too. We may need to be a little more patient or prolong the rehab expectations if there is some type of injury. Okay? So those are all things that we consider normal. You know, they're not great, but they're normal aspects of changing that we expect to see. There are certain conditions, though, that transition from normal aging to pathologic aging or abnormal aging. Doesn't mean it's not common, but some of the most frequent conditions that we see with the musculoskeletal system are things like osteoporosis. Osteopenia is that precursor. It's where my bones are starting to get weak, but I'm not, to a certain threshold. And then once the bones get brittle enough, that's diagnosed as osteoporosis. Weak bones. We do see it more in women than in men. Again, typically white women, but it does not mean that men cannot get it. Okay? Sometimes it's just accelerated poor aging of the skeletal system. There's sometimes it may be secondary to another disease or medication, right? If someone's been on steroids for a long time, maybe someone with a respiratory issue that's just had to be on chronic steroids, they're at higher risk for developing osteoporosis. So raise your hand if you've had a DEXA scan before. That's a scan that tells you how strong your bones are. Okay, most of you, all the women are raising their hands. My fellas, have you, there you go. Have you had a DEXA scan yet, sir? You have, right? Yeah, great. Because again, it's often talked about with women, but men of a certain age also need to get DEXA scans as well, because you're not immune from osteoporosis either. So it's important to know that piece. The other condition that we see frequently with our skeletal system is osteoarthritis. I could probably ask you all to raise your hands if you have some osteoarthritis. Most people do. That is inflammation of a joint, right? So where you get abnormal wear and tear of a joint, right? Some of your weight-bearing joints are more commonly involved, like hips, knees, spine, shoulders, where you have a lot of movement, also in the hands. So osteoporosis, again, is not normal, but it is very common. And then the final condition that we see here is sarcopenia, and that's just that significant loss of skeletal muscle mass and strength. Okay, so some of that is normal part of aging, but then when it gets to be a atypical amount, that's considered sarcopenia. The other condition I wanted to just briefly mention is called frailty. It's more of a syndrome or a condition that we use to describe people who are really losing a loss of function, right? And it may not be related to a particular disease, right? It's not like someone maybe was diagnosed with cancer and that's what's causing some of the issues. sometimes frailty, maybe looped in with just failure to thrive. And it's characterized by excessive or unintentional weight loss, so typically greater than 10 pounds within a year. If someone wasn't trying to lose weight, that's concerning. General exhaustion and fatigue, low physical activity, slowness, so a slow walking speed, and then generalized weakness. So this is also just a term I want to put out there that you may have had friends or family members that get into that syndrome or condition stage, considered frailty. The good thing is, out of all of these conditions, we know exercise and physical activity is powerful in helping reduce the functional limitations of them. And so we're going to talk about some general activities that we can do. I don't know if any of you all have seen or read articles about Joan McDonald. She's a fitness influencer. I'm just old enough to be beyond the enjoyment of influencers per se. My kids are not. But I love her story. So Joan was, I think she was about to hit 70 years old. She was overweight, on a lot of medications for blood pressure, cholesterol, acid reflux, all of the things that I see in pretty much all my patients at the hospital. And her daughter challenged her to say, hey mom, you gotta take care of yourself. We've seen how, the path that grandma took, you need to do more to take care of yourself. And so her story of transformation was remarkable. She started off with just a basic walking challenge, starting to do some yoga, and then like, well, maybe I can start a little bit of weight training. In one of the stories I read, she even said that when she first started, a 10-pound weight was almost impossible for her to lift. She's like, there's no way I can do this. Fast forward to years later, when she dropped 60 pounds, was given a clean bill of health from her physicians, de-prescribed a lot of her medications, and then she decided to cash in on it and become an influencer. And you can follow her on TikTok and Instagram and her webpage, because she has inspired so many people to say, hey, I had zero background in exercising, but she realized the power of leading a healthy lifestyle, looking at her diet, looking at her activity levels to improve that. So one of the biggest takeaways I always like to say is it's never too late to start. And if you have already started, you have to keep it going, right? Because exercise is not like a pill or like a one-time investment that if you do it once, you're going to sustain that benefit forever. It is a use it or lose it type of situation that you have to do. So I have a couple of slides here to talk about general benefits and considerations specifically for strength and flexibility. There's all sorts of different types of exercises. A lot of you all mentioned walking programs, which are great, especially great for your cardiovascular health, especially if you're over there at Cherokee Park trekking up and down the hills. That's going to give you some good intensity with your cardiovascular health. But we also need to make sure we're doing some strength training and flexibility, because if our musculoskeletal system is not strong enough or limber enough, it makes those other tasks, both functional and exercise-based, that much more challenging. Okay, so we're first going to look at some considerations for flexibility. So when we think about flexibility, it's basically how far can I move my gentle. You want to listen to your body, right? You should be stretching to a point of tension, but not to a point of pain. Pain is a protective mechanism. It is your body saying something is going to break if you keep doing this, right? So be gentle and listen to your body. Try not to hold your breath while you're doing stretches, right? We don't want you to have a pass out or have a Valsalva maneuver when you're doing it. So be sure you're breathing. Stretching is also something you want to do on a regular basis. Do any of y'all do some early morning stretches? I have a lot of patients who like, before I even get out of bed, I maybe, go through and get my ankles moving and get my knees moving. And it's great to have that warm up for your day to get your joints moving the way they need to. The other thing we want to consider is that there's static stretching, right? So, and we'll do some here in a minute, but if I'm like pulling my toes up, so I'm stretching the back part of my calf here, I can do that static stretch. I can pull, I can hold it for 30 seconds, which is great for helping lengthen that tissue. But there's also some benefit in active dynamic stretching, right? If I go through a full range of motion, every time I'm able to maybe stretch it a little bit more. You'll see a lot of athletes, you can pretend you're a pro NFL, football player. They're out there doing a lot of skipping and hopping. Those are often dynamic stretches to also help with your body moving and warming up to get that full range of motion. So stretching is a great activity. I had several of you all mention that you do yoga classes, which is fantastic for flexibility, right?
And I do Tai Chi.
And Tai Chi, right? So we have another Tai Chi group over here. Tai Chi is and I'm going to butcher like the origin of it, but Tai Chi works on a lot of slow rhythmic movements that not only can slowly increase your flexibility and work on your range of motion because you're doing slow, controlled movements, but Tai Chi is also great for balance because you're doing a lot of out of your center of gravity movements. So Tai Chi is fantastic. I think it's also a not intimidating activity, right? I think if you watch it, you're like, I could do that. Not easy necessarily, because you definitely have to have a lot of control and timing, but I think it's not as intimidating as maybe a yoga class where somebody's, upside down and feet in the air or splits or something like that.
Qigong is good for that too.
Okay. And where do you do that activity?
Well, I do it several places. I do it at Lakeside, and I do it at Bardstown Road Presbyterian Church, and in the Earth and Spirit Center right over here.
Oh, great. You get around. I love it. I love to where you're getting to sample and take away different things from the different instructors.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Does anyone else have yoga classes that they like to do? There's someone else that did yoga over here.
Mine used to be in person, but after COVID, we stayed doing it on Zoom.
Okay.
So, we're actually doing yoga a little longer and at the same time, right, because we don't have to drive down.
Okay.
And that's
How do you like video or Zoom based versus in person?
Well,
I'm sure there's pros and cons,
yeah,
right?
exactly. There's advantage. But in Zoom, you can see the other people, so and you can see the instructor, and so you really get a big picture of what she's doing.
Yeah.
And then you can see yourself too, a little like, I don't know. I think I kind of like the Zoom. I'm not a fan of doing anything else in Zoom, but
Well, here's what, COVID was terrible, but there's definitely some good takeaways. And I think having an added option for engaging in a group instructor-led activity is great. So some people that maybe wouldn't have gotten out of their house, or my mother-in-law, heaven forbid, if she doesn't do her hair before she leaves her apartment, it might prevent her from going. But if she can do that from the comfort of her own home, I think it can be a great thing. So there's some people though that may need the socialization, or may need to get out of their house to engage in that. It's too easy to just not log onto the computer versus if somebody's waiting for me in class. Pros and cons, but I love that option.
well, the advantage was that we had been in
do it outside. And there was a study that came out this week about cognition and mental focus and how that can improve when you're out in nature and your feet are in the grass. So that's a great option to do it outside. So with flexibility, it is always an important part of any exercise routine. Even if it's a short warm-up and cool-down activity, we need to take care of our joint flexibility to ensure that everything is aligned well and not going to be under additional stress or unnecessary stress with activity. With strength training, so raise your hand if you incorporate some type of weight training in your exercise. So I see a lot of hands, which is great. We got, even if you're doing the therapy bands, even seated band exercises is fantastic because it is challenging your muscles to work. Strength training definitely needs to be a part of exercise routines because you were asking earlier about osteoporosis. So osteoporosis is when the bones get weak. The only way our bones know that they need to get stronger is to be challenged. So when you do strength training, when you lift an object, your muscles and tendons are tugging on the bone, and that stimulates the bone to say, hey, I need to be strong and be able to resist this force on it. So that helps stimulate bone growth in a normal, even aging, but normal body system. Medications that help with osteoporosis are often either telling the body to stop breaking down the bone or don't break it down quite so fast, but those medications don't always give the same signals to say, hey, I need much stronger bones too. It doesn't stimulate us to necessarily lay that new bone foundation. So when we talk about those fractures that happen sometimes with osteoporosis, they may look like they have stronger bones, but it's just because the body's not tearing down the bone, it's not necessarily replenishing it with new healthy bone. So strengthening is a definitely important part to any healthy, well-rounded exercise program. It gives us a lot of functional benefits, right? So when you think about my exercise carrying over benefits to day-to-day activity, if I can get out of my chair easier, if I can get up the stairs easier, if I can pick up my groceries easier, those are going to result in easy functional changes that you see. It can also help people manage their weight or lose weight quicker. Because even though muscle is heavier than fat, so if I'm building muscle, that's great, but it also burns calories faster than it does fat cells, right? So it can be a good component if we're thinking about weight management or keeping at a healthy weight, or even putting weight on if we have somebody that is malnourished or underweight. So with strength training, we want to think about doing that usually 2 to 3 times a week. Strength training isn't something you're necessarily going to do every day, or at least working on the same muscles. Because what happens when I lift a really heavy object, I actually cause these micro trauma in my muscle, and then my body says, okay, go repair itself, and it repairs that muscle a little bit stronger, a little bit thicker. And so you need a little bit of time between strength training to let your body do what it does best to heal and repair itself. So whereas there's recommendations to do cardiovascular training, like that walking, treadmill, biking, usually 5 to 7 times a week, strength training you want to do usually just 2 to 3 times a week. And that's enough to help your body create good, healthy muscles, okay? When you're doing strength training, weight matters, okay? So if you say, yep, I do my strength training, I got my little dumbbells, 2-pound dumbbells, I could do this all day long. If it's not challenging you, it's not changing you, okay? The weight matters, right? So something needs to be, the amount of weight needs to be challenging, that you're not able to do this all day long, right? So usually the appropriate weight then after that, you're like, I'm tired. I can't, I'm done, I'm spent. Great, that's a good challenge for you, right? If you can barely do one and it's bad form, and hurts, that's too much, right? But again, if you're just confident like this, you need to get a bigger dumbbell or a stronger band, or put your hands on the band differently, right? So your weight really does matter. If you're somebody that's been doing an exercise or strength training class for a while, which is great, consistency is key, but over time you may need to increase the amount of weight you're doing because your muscles are stronger. So you need to then continue to challenge them at a higher weight than what you're doing, okay? Form matters. If you're somebody that has never engaged in strength training, you may benefit from getting a personal trainer or going to a class where someone is able to show you how to properly do that. Because you can hurt yourself if you're doing strength training and not doing it with good form. So form does matter, and if you're just somebody who's clueless on it, get some help, someone to guide you through the proper exercises and how you can do it correctly. But I love, there's becoming more and more gyms across the U.S. that are really geared towards good weightlifting training with older adults. So I love these pictures, what's showing, hey, she's lifting some heavy weight there and doing her body a lot of good. She's capable, it's safe, challenging but safe, but form matters. And so she's getting some good instruction there on how to do that exercise. So form matters. We also talked about recovery matters, right? If you are doing really good, intense strength training, your muscles are probably going to be sore that next day. And that's okay. That's that kind of micro trauma. It's healing and repairing. So, sorry, I think I hit my mic here. But take some time to recover, right? You don't want to do that intense strength training every day, or else you might be putting too much stress on your musculoskeletal system. Start slowly, gradually increase, so that way your body is adapting and adjusting appropriately as you go on. The last thing I like to always encourage people to do, and these can be demonstrated really well in classes, is doing functional exercises, right? I can do my bicep curl, which is great, but maybe I'm working on lifting a weight and putting it on a shelf. Or maybe I'm working on doing a squat from a chair and standing up. Like sit-to-stands are my favorite exercise. Because not only am I strengthening these big muscles, but it's going to translate into those functional daily tasks that you're doing, right? Does anybody remember, I can't remember the company. There was a commercial at Christmas. I first saw it maybe 2 years ago, and it had this elderly gentleman who dragged out this kettlebell from his gym, and every day he started just barely picking it up, and then picking it up higher. And then, a kettlebell is like a kind of a big metal lifting object. Kept doing it, and then in the final scene of the commercial, it had him lifting his grandchild so they could put a star on the top of the tree. I was like, oh, I love it. What a functional exercise with a real goal that's translating into the activities you want. So I love older adults. So any commercial with a grandma in it, I love. So these are some general principles of strength training that you want to think about. Now, with all exercise programs, whether it's flexibility or strength training, you do want to take into consideration any special needs that you might have, okay? So if you have had a shoulder replacement, you might have some rotator cuff surgery, you might have some motions that you need to avoid, right? To not put too much strain on that. If you're somebody that has osteoporosis, right, there's a risk of vertebral or spine fractures if you lean over a lot, right? So or my knee hurts, I have arthritis, so it hurts when I walk upstairs, what else can I do instead, right? So it's all about trying to not let those problems stop you from doing it. It's a matter of saying, how can I modify what I'm doing to still get to the same goal at the end of it, okay? And with, our osteoarthritis, with osteoporosis, with sarcopenia, all of those conditions can be improved with deliberate and intentional exercise. It just needs to be done in a safe and appropriate manner for that. Just a couple of tips for success we've talked about a lot already. First of all, do things you enjoy. If you do not like going to the gym and lifting weights, you're not going to do it successfully, right? But if you maybe do enjoy going to Tai Chi or doing yoga, find activities that you know you're going to enjoy because it will make the likelihood of you sticking to it that much better. Again, it must be challenging, right? If you find that, man, I go to the gym 6 times a week, I'm doing awesome, and you rarely break a sweat, or you rarely get to the point where you're out of breath, or you don't feel any changes, you may need to evaluate what you're doing and saying, okay, is it challenging? Because if it's not challenging, it's not changing you. Consider group classes. We talked about this a little bit already. There are so many different modes of exercises, and finding whatever is going to be the most effective for you will be helpful. I am a class exercise girl. If you tell me to do 10 burpees, I'll do it. If I'm in my basement at home by myself, I am not going to do it. So whether it's the camaraderie, the competitiveness, the structure, it can be so effective in helping you get more out of your exercises. Now, if you're someone that doesn't, like I like to do it at my own time, maybe 11 p.m. is your time to exercise, in that case, just have a plan, right? Maybe writing out, here are the exercises I want to do the next time I exercise, or here's how far I want to walk. So that way you do have a little bit of a plan. Having these big setting goals is important. I want to lose 10 pounds, or I want to improve my blood pressure, or I want to be able to, walk 3 miles. Great to have that big plan, but then you have to have your steps along the way mapped out that are going to help you get there. Listen to your body. We already talked about maybe the need to modify things. So always, after any new type of exercise, you say, like, okay, how did my body like that? Was it a good, favorable thing? Am I good sore afterwards? Or is there something noticeable that is telling you this was not right for me? Accountability is key. Having that buddy to meet you can be so helpful, both socially and having accountability. And then again, seek professional guidance if you have questions, or if you're just not sure which direction to go. There are a lot of resources and professionals out there. There's also all sorts of resources online. I think even like Silver Sneakers has a lot of online classes, handouts that even say, here's some good activities that you can do. Okay, I'm not letting you leave before we do a couple of exercises. They're all going to be easy. I would like you all to put your papers aside, sit up tall for me, throw your papers around, that's fine. All right, we're first going to start with just a side stretch. So as you're able, raise your arms overhead. You need to kind of clasp your arms together. And then let's just start to lean to the right side. Either your right or my right, doesn't matter. Just start with your neighbor. Remember, take some good deep breaths. We're just going to hold this for a little bit. Sometimes it's so nice to make myself just slow down and breathe. All right, back up to the middle. And then now we're going to go to the other side. Just slowly within that range that you have available. You can take your left hand and you would give a gentle pull on your arm if you want. You should feel both in your shoulders and just along sword stretch. It's a shoulder stretch. Again, do it within the range of motion that you have. I want you to take your right hand, I guess here, I'll mirror, you mirror me. So your right hand, I want you to reach across your body like you're grabbing your sword. And then I want you to unsheath your sword. So, and I want you to let your eyes and head follow, like look and see where that sword is going to as far as you can. And then I want you to put your sword back in the sheath. I do work at Bellarmine, so we can just take, oh nice. Unsheath that sword, and then follow with your eyes and your arms up as high as you can. Good. Okay, we're gonna do the same thing with your left hand. Reach across your body. You can kind of bend down to grab that sword and unsheath your sword. Follow with your arms and your head. You should feel stretch both in your shoulders and in your upper chest. Good. Put your sword back in. And we're going to unsheath that sword one last time. Make sure you follow with your eyes and your arm. So we get a good shoulder, chest, neck stretch. Good. Alright. Everybody doing okay? Alright. Next one we're going to do, again, I want you sitting kind of to the edge of your seat if you can. We're going to do a brief hamstring stretch. Nobody has flexible hamstrings, I guarantee. Let's start with your right leg. You're going to pull your toes up towards you, and then you're going to slowly reach your right hand down towards your toes. Now I do want you to think about keeping your back flat, okay? If you feel like you're really rounding out to touch your toes, don't worry about that. Keep a nice flat back. Just going to slowly stretch. I want you to be sure you're keeping your toes pointed up, because that also adds to the not only kind of calf stretch, but a nerve stretch on the back of your legs. Don't worry, I can't touch my toes. So, and if you feel your knee kind of popping up, it just means you're cheating, okay? Which I'm not opposed to, but alright. Stand up, take a deep breath, or not stand up, so just sit up. Then we're gonna do the same thing over on your left side. So toes up towards your body. Take that left arm and slowly reach down your shin, keeping a nice flat back. Only go to where you feel stretch, where you feel tension. It should not feel a sharp pain. Be sure you're breathing. Alright, sit up for me again. And then the last flexibility we're going to do is just a nice ankle stretch, okay? So start with your right ankle. We can go up and down. You can do circles. I like going circles both directions. So maybe 5 times in one direction, 5 times in the other. If you're like me, I start hearing some snap, crackle, pop. Another one, if you're really creative, you can pretend you have a pen sticking out your great toe and you can write letters with that pen. That really gets some good, especially if you have had an ankle injury in the past and you kind of have some stiffness there. You can write your name, you can write Nazareth, all sorts of good things. Alright, switch sides. Let's get that left ankle. So first, just up and down. from a taller chair than it is from a low couch without any arms, right? So if you're able, let's do anywhere from 5 to 10 reps of sit to stand. Good. And like I said, modify as you need. If you need to use your armrest or even just on one side of the push-up, do it. My sweet dad had, he's recovered from a couple strokes from 2 years ago, and he was just one of those personalities that you tell him to do it 10 times, he's going to do it 95 times. So his sit to stand score is phenomenal. So, okay, the next one, I'll have you stand up, and you're going to just step up to the chair in front of you to lightly hang on, okay? And tell you what, we're going to skip the lunge, we'll just do the standing hip exercise. So you can just, either if you need to lean on it, you can, or if you can just do just fingertip support, you're going to take your right leg and you're going to bring it out to the side and back down. This is isolating one of your glute muscles, your butt muscles here. And this muscle is really, really important for stability. It helps hold you up so we're not going wonky from side to side when we're standing there. Even sometimes just 3 or 4 reps, you'll feel exactly where your glute medius is, right? Can y'all feel it right on the side of your hip? Yeah. Okay, good. Let's go ahead and switch sides. Let's see if we can get maybe 5 reps here. So ideally, if I'm trying to get good strength training, I want to get 8 to 10 reps to the point where I feel really sore, right? If that's easy, there's ways you can make it more challenging. You can add a band, you can add reps, you can add a cuff weight. If it's hard, you maybe just don't take it out as far, right? So I'm still getting that muscle work, but maybe I don't have the flexibility or the range of motion to go as far as I can. The last one we're going to do is working our calf muscles. Okay, so again, I'm going to keep my fingertip support here, and we're just going to raise up on our tiptoes and back down. This does actually help with flexibility of our great toe, our big toe, which is important, right? If you're somebody who's like, okay, this is easy, how can I make it harder? I can either not hold on to see how that balance is. If you're like, got it, no problem, see if you can do it with just one leg, right? Because what that does is doubles the amount of weight that you're having to do it, right? If it's too hard, maybe I just do maybe 3 reps and just try and raise my heel up maybe an inch or 2 off the ground, right? So these are all pretty easy exercises that you can also add into your day. Like while you're brushing your teeth, you're like, oh, I'm gonna do a couple leg lifts here because Jane Fonda would be proud of me when I was heel, right? So those are just some easy exercises that, again, no equipment needed, but they're working on strengthening those muscles and working on your flexibility of your joints to make sure that you can do all the functional tasks that you want to do. All right. We are just about out. Oh, we are exactly out of time. I did put my contact information up here with my email and my work phone number at Bellarmine. So if you leave here and you're like, I thought of a question, you're more than welcome to reach out to me. If anybody has a question right now, I'm happy to stick around. Yeah.
Go back to the mineral loss.
Yes.
Is there any kind of supplement or anything that we should take? I mean, I hear people talk about omega-3.
Yeah, so for osteoporosis, and again, for when we start to get into nutrition or medication, I'm certainly going to refer you to your physician. But calcium and vitamin D are the 2 most commonly recommended things for bone density. And again, supplements are great. Dietary intake is best, right? So if you're thinking of foods, dairy products, green leafy vegetables that may even have both high calcium and vitamin D supplements. Vitamin D is a little trickier because as we get older, a lot of times we say sunlight, but our body doesn't process the sunlight or turn it into vitamin D as easily as we get older. So some people do need vitamin D supplementation as well. not been shown to impact osteoporosis or impact bone strength walking alone. It's really the strength training that you have to have. Now, walking is still great. I'm never going to say don't do it, but the strength training and balance training, right? Because if you're somebody with osteoporosis, the osteoporosis isn't going to make you fall necessarily, but if you fall, the osteoporosis increases your risk of injury. So typically we recommend balance training just to hopefully reduce your risk of falling, and then strength training to help your body stimulate that bone growth. And then a good healthy diet and all those things. And like I said, some people do need medication to, if they're really at that critical threshold from a bone density standpoint, they may need medication. And there's new medications coming out all the time that are improving from even some of the original Fosamaxes and things like that. What other questions? Is there anything you're going to change differently about your exercise routine?
Yeah, I'm gonna add a couple of machines.
Okay, great. And make sure you're challenging yourself enough.
Always.
Good. And again, not to the point of hurting yourself, but it is easy sometimes to get stuck in that, okay, this is my good routine, it works, I'm able to get through it. But sometimes we just need to pause and say, okay, is it hard enough? Are there things that I should shake it up a little bit and try something different? Any other questions? Well, you guys have been delightful. I really appreciate you coming today, and kudos to you all for the engagement and the proactive investment in your health and well-being. It's always an inspiration to me. I love sharing it with my students because it's truly we would like to not see you all when you're as patients. We would rather see it here on this wellness end. So thank you all so much. Have a good afternoon. Okay.